Stepping into Frank Zappa's world has never been as simple as listening to an album. For many newcomers, the biggest obstacle is not the complexity of his music, but the question of where to begin. Zappa was not just a guitarist or a band leader. He constructed an entire sonic universe with its own physics, characters, and narrative threads. Every project he touched, rock albums, orchestral experiments, satirical theater pieces, film scores, felt like fragments of a vast, shifting mosaic that only he could see in full. Nothing in his catalog stands entirely alone. Everything is connected, everything has a role, and everything belongs to the sprawling ecosystem that fans now call the Zapverse. While most artists of the late 1960s were chasing radio hits, Zappa was busy assembling an interconnected body of work that functioned like an evolving organism. His albums weren't separate releases. They were chapters in a single lifelong composition that he constantly reshaped. He rearranged themes, recycled motifs, and stitched together fragments recorded years apart. And somehow it all formed a coherent language. To understand Zappa is to accept that his discography isn't a library, it's a planet. From within that enormous cosmos, he had a handful of pieces he considered personal triumphs, not because they were famous, but because they represented his purest artistic breakthroughs. These were works that captured the essence of his vision: humor, chaos, orchestral ambition, social commentary, and the refusal to obey any musical rule that didn't serve his imagination. One of the earliest peaks appeared in the strange, dreamlike experiment known as Lumpy Gravy. At first listen, the album feels like a fever dream assembled from orchestra rehearsals, vocal murmurs, surf rock shards, tape manipulation, and bursts of absurdity. It's a collage that seems to melt and reform as it plays. Hidden inside this labyrinth is a small section Zappa treasured, a brief passage that almost disappears in the surrounding madness. He called it Pigs and Ponies. It's not a standalone track, but a fragment buried so deeply that only his most attentive listeners ever notice it. To Zappa, it demonstrated exactly how far he could push the boundaries of editing, orchestration, and dark humor, years before most of the music world understood what he was doing. From there, he moved into the era of We're Only in It for the Money, the album that turned the counterculture movement on its head. While much of the world embraced flower power and gentle idealism, Zappa chose to expose its contradictions. Within that album lies a piece he viewed as one of his most daring blends of theater, satire, and musical distortion: The Idiot Bastard Son. It emerged from the environment he grew up in, transforming real people and suburban archetypes into grotesque characters that populated his fictional universe. The track shifts mood and tempo without warning, drifting between humor and darkness as if reflecting a society that can't decide what it believes in. Through layered vocals and jagged rhythms, Zappa created a miniature portrait of moral confusion in America, not through preaching, but through controlled musical chaos. He also pointed to a work from Absolutely Free, an album so dense and fast-moving that even dedicated listeners sometimes struggle to catch everything. Buried within its whirlwind lies what he regarded as one of his most explosive political satires: Brown Shoes Don't Make It. In less than 8 minutes, the piece jumps between classical pastiche, psychedelic bursts, theatrical parody, and the kind of proto-electronic experiments that barely existed at the time. Its subject matter is a scathing indictment of hypocrisy in American public life, told not through straightforward storytelling, but through a surreal sonic theater. The track feels like an opera compressed into a pressure cooker, funny on the surface, unsettling at its core, and unmistakably Zappa. To understand his roots, he also returned to Freak Out, the 1966 debut album that introduced Mothers of Invention as a force determined to demolish the boundaries of popular music. From this album, he singled out two pieces that embodied the spirit of his early vision. The first, Who Are the Brain Police?, carries the energy of a warning transmitted from a dystopian future. Its vocal delivery sounds like an alarm, and its harmonies are deliberately claustrophobic, creating an atmosphere of collective anxiety. For Zappa, it was more than an experiment. It was a portrait of a society quietly surrendering its individuality. The second, It Can't Happen Here, operates like a spell of absurdity. Free from traditional melody and rhythm, it unfolds as layers of voices, strange chants, and rhythmic fragmentation. What sounds like playful nonsense gradually becomes a distorted reflection of America's self-image, revealing how fragile cultural optimism can be. For Zappa, pieces like this proved that music could be abstract and still communicate powerful truths about the world. These 5 selections were not about what sold well or what fans played the most. They were guideposts, glimpses into the inner logic of an artist who refused to choose between genres, mediums, or identities. In a catalog approaching 100 albums and encompassing everything from doo-wop parodies to full-scale orchestral works, these pieces form a subtle map of what he valued most in his own creativity. The Zapverse is not an easy place to enter, but for those brave enough to explore it, these works open the first door. They show a universe where music is not confined to entertainment, but becomes commentary, rebellion, and an ever-evolving puzzle. Listening deeply means stepping into a world that challenges every assumption about what music is supposed to be, and rewards those willing to follow its most unpredictable paths.